this lesson here takes a little bit of just slow, careful reading. It has so much confusion in the world today that we just forget that sometimes the answer's already been given to us. And we find this answer after the apostles said, Jesus, we got questions. You just said something and we got questions about it. We see this a couple of times throughout the scriptures where the disciples come to him, and usually it says they came to him privately, like it does in this section of scripture here, that they come and say, we've got questions. They actually ask the questions. That's not a direct quote from the Bible. Don't try and look for it or hold me accountable for that. I don't have record of the disciples saying we have questions. But they ask questions about topics that they're unfamiliar with. I think that can be a great thing for us to think about today, is that especially for spiritual things, do we ask questions? Or do we assume things? Do we just make up our own things? And the world is very good at making up its own. It's been like that for years. It's described like that in the Bible, New and Old Testament, that mankind has its own imagination. And we don't always follow God. So the disciples had a question about something that Jesus said, and so they asked him about it. And quite honestly, if we read and study it carefully, we can avoid the many deceitful people and sayings of the world today and stay the course. That is something I see more prevalent in all of Jesus' answers in these three questions that are asked than I do the answer. He gives us the answer, but I see more repeatedly, stay the course. I see, don't be deceived, repeatedly throughout the answer for all three questions. And so something to think about as we look at this is that Jesus, we have questions, and Jesus says, I have the answers. Stay with me. If we would stay with Jesus, kind of like this morning's lesson, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He whoever lets me in, I will eat with him and him with me. If we eat with Christ, if we stay with him, if we don't go to someone else's buffet of nasty garbage, and we stay with the healthy spiritual food of Christ, we can avoid all these other things, and we can find where he's given us the answers. Now, one of the answers is that I don't have the full answer, and we'll see that when we get to it. In Matthew chapters 24 and 25 is where we'll be. To give a little context to where he's coming from, at the end of 23, or in most of 23, he is giving the woes to those who ought to know better. We have all the woes going down. We have him calling, ye serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the judgment of hell? That's a pretty harsh way to get ready to end the chapter right here. And he comes down, and I want to catch verse 36 real quick of chapter 23, because we see this again in 24. But in verse 36, he says, Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. The one he is talking to, not the ones that are reading it now. We need to put our minds into these scriptures themselves and understand who is talking, when it's going on, what's going on. And when Jesus is in the temple and he is giving all these woes to the people that are doing so wrong and haven't listened to him, to God in the last, how many thousand years? Or to Jesus in the last 3 years of his ministry, he calls them a generation of vipers, and he gives several things that are going to happen. He says certain things publicly to all of them there, and he says these will happen to this generation. We need to remember that as we go forward into these questions. So as we begin chapter 24, we see that and Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. So we are outside of the city. We're at a place where you can look in and see the grandeur of the temple. You can see how magnificent, how large this place is. And Jesus says to them, "See ye not all these things? Look upon the city," specifically the temple. We see the inner areas. We see the outer walls. We see all of the grandeur that has been built. Look at this. "Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." We've all seen a large wall. I mean, we've got walls in here that I would not care to try and rebuild inside this building. However, we're looking at the temple, a large structure with huge blocks. In the picture that I have up here on the slide, the little dots on the bottom are people with this huge wall above them. Think of grand scale like this. That's a full-size grown adult at the bottom of the screen. And you're going to tell me that not one stone will be left on another? I think I might be like the disciples in this next part here. "And he sat upon the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came to him privately, saying," we have questions. "Tell us, when shall these things be?" That's question one. "And what shall the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the earth?" Jesus told them that not one stone will be left upon another, and they came back with three questions. When will this be? What's the sign of your coming? And what's the sign of the end of the world? They're trying to put together the future. They're trying to figure out, you just said the temple will be destroyed because you're bringing a new kingdom. When is the temple going to be destroyed? When are you coming again? There's still confusion right now as to whether that's going to be within their lifetime, whether that's going to be for him to come back and establish the kingdom on earth physically, and then when's the end of the time going to be? They want to know. They are curious. You know what questions tell me? They're listening. Sometimes we get to Bible studies and we get to reading the Bible and it's like, do we have questions? That shows a level of curiosity. It shows a level of engagement. And so the disciples have been walking with him and said, what about these three things? So taking these questions one at a time, it takes two of our chapters to cover those answers. And we start off with chapter 24 in the next verses. When shall these things be? The things that they're asking about is Jesus just said that the temple would be destroyed. So as we look at this, we start to see Jesus answered. When Jesus said, "Seek and ye shall find," he meant it. So now we have him saying, Jesus answered, said unto them, "Take heed that no man deceive you." Jesus, how is that going to be the answer to the question? That's how you start your answer? We ask, when is the temple going to be destroyed? And you say, don't let anyone deceive you. Is it perhaps because as mankind we are too often easily swayed? There are so many that see an opportunity to try to deceive or be cunning and crafty that they seize opportunities. We could look at how many different schemes there are to try and get your money in the world today. And all they are lies. You're going to send them something, so they'll send you more. No, I'll keep it. He knows what is coming. Take heed that no man deceive you and lead you astray. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of war, that you be not troubled. See that you be not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. How many people have predicted the end of times? Jesus hadn't even started talking about that one yet. But how many people want to talk about the end of time, or I can predict when this is going to happen? Jesus said, every one of them talks about a certain war. Oh, see these wars? That was this. Jesus just told them in the answer to the first question here, do not be troubled. Second, the end is not yet. And he's not even talking about the end of time. So why are we talking about wars as predicting the date? Don't be deceived. Don't listen to those who say I am the Christ. There is only one Christ, and if I may speak as Jesus did then, I have done enough to prove who I am, that you have recognized who I am, that you can tell a false when they come. Can we not hear Jesus say something like that? The Son of Man does not have any question about who he is. He came with all the might and power and works and wonders and speech. And we talked about that this morning. But the first part about when will the destruction of the temple be is Jesus brings up the idea of the rumors of war. They will become more than just rumors. But they start as rumors. When we look at what all has happened in history, especially with some of the earthly historians that are not recorded in the Bible, non-inspired works that record the events that happened. They show the conflicts that happened within that government of the entire city. We see how the politics changed, how the rulers there changed, how several would die or be killed. And everyone, obviously, when you change rulers, you always have the fear of the unknown. You have the fear of war. You have the fear of conflict. And the Roman nation is about to have many struggles before it falls. And we see a several-year gap in here from the time of Christ until the time that the temple falls, if we go and study the history of it, where we see these struggles internally. The rumors of war. And again, we see, he said this is the end is not yet. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. And these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they shall deliver you up to be the afflicted, shall kill you, shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. You will be followers of me, and because of my name and the power that it carries, you'll be persecuted for my name. Remember, as part of these answers, I found a bigger theme than just the answers. Again, he warns them about falling away. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. In the overtaking of the city, we also notice, and in all of these things, that there were big slaughterings of people, especially when the city was overtaken from a historical standpoint. But even before then, he says the time has not come yet. There will be people betraying one another. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And because of iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. There's the bigger theme in all these questions. If someone is going to be saved, if for my name's sake, if there are false, that means there has to be some truth there. The next verse tells us another element of things that must come before the fall of Jerusalem, and that is verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations. and then shall the end come. All nations will receive the word of Christ. We will see that it will endure. We see the gospel of the kingdom preached. So for them standing there that moment, it's not today and it's not tomorrow. It's not next week. You have a little bit of time. But we're about to see how quickly the gospel spreads. They are told in the next verses down from 15 to 28, there will be a time to flee Jerusalem when the end comes. Daniel took and told them to watch out for these signs. Christ even tells them this right here in verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the admonition of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy places. Whosoever readeth this, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. The prophet Daniel, hundreds of years prior to Christ standing there, prophesied how the city would fall. When you see those signs, get out. That's when you leave, because it's about to happen. And we get to see this happen as the armies come in after the different regime changes within the Roman government, and then the armies come in to surround the city, but then they withdraw back to a city for a few years, and then they come in and conquer the city. When you see it coming, leave. But wait for the signs of Daniel. Something else to think about is that when you see the time to flee, it's time to flee. Don't worry about the physical. We see this in verse 17 and 18. If you are on your rooftop, which is a customary place to sleep because it's a cooler spot, don't go packing your bags before you leave. If you're out in the field and it's time to leave, don't go home and pack your bags. Leave. And be mindful of the hardships in case of what time it is. Don't wait till the last minute. There is a time span, if I'm reading correctly from the historians that I was looking at in the research, there were several years there that when the armies came to surround the city, they withdrew, and it was a couple more years before they took the city. Don't wait. You don't know when they're going to come back to attack. So if you are, and it cites those that are pregnant, it cites those that, don't let it be on the Sabbath. The Sabbath, obviously, for the Christian is not a religious observance. However, it's more of the city will be shut. A lot of cities, for safety, if everyone's in worship, if everyone's not out and about, if there's not doing market and trade, they close the city walls. You can't get out. So if they attack on the Sabbath or the next day, you're in there and you're stuck. When we see a time to act, we need to act. I think that's another point we can look at in all of this. Those are the signs, and that is the times for the fall of Jerusalem, for the fall of the temple. They asked 3 questions. Jesus answers question number 2. Starting in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the ones he just talked about, shall the sun be darkened, moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Now, I do not believe he is talking about literally. I think spiritually. How much emphasis is held for the city of Jerusalem and for the temple to everyone of this time, even the Jews that have who have left Judaism and gone on to Christianity. A lot of times they're referred to as the Jewish Christians. They are Christians who were formerly Jews. There is still great respect because that was the house of God. That was built by his command to his specifications. To see something like that fall would be heartbreaking. would be such a gut wrench. It's like, look at how people talk about it today still, about Jerusalem and about the temple. There's still a lot of passion about that, even though there's a new covenant. There will be great things that fall. Many will lose their faith. All will see it when it happens. As we continue into verse 30, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So when he just said, if someone says, I am the Christ, that doesn't match up to what Christ is informing them here. What is a sign of your coming? He says, don't believe the people that are going to walk around and try and claim they're me. Everyone will see it. Everyone will know it. There's not going to be any guessing. There's not going to be what Christ had to do at the beginning of his ministry to prove who he was. To prove that you're a prophet, you had to do things. When he comes back as the Son of Man, there is no proof required. We're going to know it. And he tells us all nations will know it. Those living at the time said they would see things, the physical things of Jerusalem falling. Look at verses 33 and 34. So likewise ye, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, he is not talking about the second coming of Christ. He is talking about the ability that we have to see the Jerusalem fall. It was only a matter of years before the city fell. There were those of that generation that saw that. Now, there are other instances where we see the Son of Man come in some of these formats, but it's not an equal representation. We can see where Christ stood from his throne when Stephen was martyred. We can see where Christ revealed himself from heaven when Saul was on the road to Damascus. That's not what this one's talking about. He's giving ideas about when you see the Son of Man coming again, and how glorious and how awestruck everyone will be. But he reminds us that this generation that he's talking to right now will see the fall of Jerusalem. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Going back to the idea of the eternal and looking at the second coming. And we also see that no man knows the hour. Verse 36. But of that day, an hour knoweth no man. The day that heaven and earth shall pass away, the day that Christ will come again, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, not even Christ, who will be sent. But my Father only. Anyone who claims to know when that's going to happen is just a straight out liar. They do not have the Word of God in them, because if they did, they would know this verse right here, that no person knows. The angels don't know. Christ himself doesn't know. So how do you? Unless you are God the Father, you don't. But how many people follow and listen to those dates that are being quoted and spoken about? That is why Christ says, do not be deceived. And so he tells them, this is what it will look like. You will see it coming. So what is the sign of the end of the earth? What is the sign of the final judgment of, as they said, and the end of the world? We have to understand that the end of the world and Christ's second coming are together. When Christ comes again, it will bring the end of the world. We see that through this one here. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word shall not pass away. Signs of the end of the world. He gives more revelation into that as we look through chapter 25. He says, "Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto," and we see two different comparisons here. We see intermingled into some of this in the end of chapter 24 of how it will come as a thief in the night. We don't know the timing. But then it will happen. They happen together. Many will fall away. We see the first parable of the 10 virgins. They brought lamps out, and there was like a bowl. It had fuel in it. And 5 of them brought extra with them. He just told us about a thief coming in the middle of the night at some hour of the night. If the master of the house knew, if you're at home and you know when the thief is coming, are you going to be awake or asleep at that hour to protect your house and to be ready for the thief? We're going to be awake. The 10 virgins are out waiting for the bridegroom to come. They don't know what time he will be there. Are you going to be awake or asleep? Are you going to bring enough oil to make it through the night, just in case he comes in the morning? 5 were prepared. 5 were not. So we see the idea that he comes at an unexpected time, and 5 of them left to go get more oil because they were unprepared. We also see the parable of the talents, where different ones were given different amounts, and when the master came back, he asked for an accounting of what have you done with it, and one just went and buried it in the field. He was unprepared. If we go down to verses 31 and 32, we see that all nations will come before Christ for the judgment. In verse 31, he starts off, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory," another verse tying the two things together, "and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon his throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats." He just talked about previously answering the last question, how will we know your second coming? He said all nations will see. Now he says all nations will be in front of him for the judgment. The two come together as one. We have to be ready. There are many more smaller studies or more in-depth studies that can be taken from this text. Like I said, very simply, the signs will not be mistaken or up for interpretation. Oh, we just had a small conflict over here. I guess that means the end is coming. No, we got to go look at the scriptures a little better. The rumors of wars is not a sign of the end of days. It was a sign of things that were to happen right then in that generation of the first century to the fall of Jerusalem. There always have been wars and always will be wars until the final one. And the final one has already been declared a winner to God and his followers. Don't wander or lose focus. Keep the faith and stay watchful, not taking for granted the time that we have been given, because we don't know how much time that is. The 10 virgins tells us that one. We don't know what time he will come. We don't know what time the thief will come in the night. That is how the end may come for us in our earthly life, and it's how the time will come for the world at Christ's second coming. We don't know when it'll be. There won't be a warning. There is no National Weather Service alert that's going to come out that's going to say, get right now because tomorrow we die. Tomorrow is the last day on earth. We see all the signs. We don't get that alert. We get that for severe weather. We don't get that for our spirit. Our spirit needs to always be ready. The question is it ready? Are we in Christ? Are we abiding in Him and His Word? Are we finding the answers to our questions? Do we have questions? Anyone here is able to write down, either just talk to me if you have questions, or let's talk with one another. There's a box in the foyer to write questions down and place them in. Anyone online can easily find me and message me. Email us. On the website, there's a contact us. You can leave questions there. Reach out with questions. The Bible has answers. If there are questions within our own minds about our own salvation, we are told today is the day of salvation. We're also told work out our own with fear and trembling. We need to be sure, and we can be sure. Let's use the Bible as our guide and as the answer book, because it holds what we need. Let's be like the disciples who said, Master, we have questions. They were seeking answers. Let's find the answers in God's book. If anyone has need of the invitation, we offer it now. Together we stand.